Hey everyone, Brad here again. Welcome to my living room. This time I'm going to do a video about the good question that's been on my mind lately. Given that there seems to be an awful lot more alternatives these days in the the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle market, I'm frankly rather interested if I would take the same money that I did last year and walk out and buy the same car. It's a long way for me to say, would I buy the same car again knowing what I know now and what's on the market versus a year ago? So if that's something you're interested in, please stick around. And as always, if you're interested in my long-term love affair with this ridiculous car of mine, please consider hitting that like button and subscribe and browse the channel. So as any of you who watch my videos know, I absolutely love my crazy clarity for all the reasons that I actually anticipated I would love it for, i.e. the range, the comfort, the quietness, and all the rest of that. And of course, even some that I didn't. More on that in the other videos in my playlist here. So, however, as I started digging into the question of would I still buy this car, I uncovered some other options that frankly make the choice of my clarity not as obvious as it was perhaps a year ago when I decided to pull the pin and actually make the purchase. So now I do have to say though that my criteria for why I would choose a plug-in hybrid car or how I would choose that have not changed in that year, i.e. I'm not magically worth twice as much as I was before, I don't have that much better income, etc., etc. So in descending order, it should come as no surprise to you folks who've watched my videos before. The first is EV range. My whole goal when buying the Clarity or any car at that time was to get a car with the maximum battery storage that I could, that my budget would allow for. As I was going to drive this car, it was my purposeful goal to drive the car in EV mode as much as possible, as much as my life can facilitate. Second, of course, is reliability. One of the main reasons for going EV or plug-in EV or hybrid EV was because, as you've probably heard me mention before, I was beyond frustrated at paying what I would consider a ridiculous amount of money or effort, since I work on my own cars most of the time, to keep an average car going. You may recall from other videos I have how I've ranted about seemingly practical cars costing, $5,000 or more a year for maintenance, and then not only maintenance but repair on a car that's 5 years old, less than 60,000 miles or 100,000 kilometers. To me, that was and still is patently absurd. And the third criterion rather, is interior comfort. I'm not a guy, I'm not 100 years old, which means I need super comfort, but for the money I was going to spend, I anticipated and I expected a certain level of comfort and quality. I use my car a lot, as we all do, and I have kids who play sports and I travel, so I needed a car that would handle all the hockey gear, that could sit 3 almost teenagers across the back. Not for too long, but for long enough that they wouldn't stab each other with pencils and things like that. So, and all of this had to be within and under, frankly, about 50K Canadian, 30, well, whatever the dollar's at these days, 38, 40 US. Simply because that's my budget up here. I could have spent more probably, depending on what I wanted to get out of that car and the longevity and things like that, but 50K was a good number to start with. So as any good researcher with a PhD in Google would do, I started alphabetically through the cars that are available in North America, and I'll obviously cut to those because I'm sure you folks like me would rather watch information on the screen rather than just a big ugly talking head. So we'll cut to that in a minute here. But going alphabetically, and forgive me, I have to refer to my sheet here, starting with Audi. Now they have the fully electric EV Quattro, or e-tron Quattro rather, which is a gorgeous car. I think it's based on the Q7 or Q8, probably the Q8. I mean, it's awesome. It's huge. It's got all the space you'd want, all the luxury. I mean, it even has, I didn't know you could do this with cars, but it has, you can choose the scent that comes out of the vents. I mean, really, half my cars smelled like gasoline when I was younger, so that to me still seems a bit strange. But that is out of my range for two reasons, bad pun not intended. One is it's 100% out of my price range, and the second thing is, of course, it's fully electric. So this is not a list of the available electric cars. It's clearly about whether I would choose the same plug-in hybrid electric vehicle that I have before. So that one's clearly out of the gate, or out of the consideration. But they do make an A3 e-tron, and I'm not sure if it's Quattro or not, or if it's available. I kind of don't think so, but please correct me if you know that. And actually, a friend of mine happens to have one, and it's a great car. And he is, he's starting to get into that whole, I really like that I can drive a lot of this on electricity and things like that. But unfortunately, it has an 8.8 kilowatt hour battery pack, and it's only rated for 26 kilometers, which is about 15 miles. So while it's better than nothing, it's really, you get a little better fuel economy, and at the end of the day, it has all of the complexities of a regular Audi A3, meaning it still has a DSG, which is cool if that's what you like, but I doubt it would be inexpensive to maintain. So again, that's kind of off my list. Plus, frankly, I don't even know what price range they're at, but again, since the range is so low, it wouldn't be under my consideration at the moment. BMW, moving to the Bs, of course. On this list, I have two, PHEVs that I bothered to research. There's a 5 Series and a 7 Series. Imagine that. And while they're lovely places to be, my dad had a current generation 5 Series for a while. It's beautiful. It's wonderful inside. The 5 only has a 9.2 kilowatt hour battery, and the 7 only a 12. So again, this would be a nice supplement to the ICE. If it was a diesel, for example, you'd get really good range, really good mileage. But again, I was purposeful trying to get the longest EV range I could, so they were not. They would continue not to be make it past my first gate of the range that I'm looking for. And frankly, I was a bit surprised. At first anyway, that the i8 only has an 11.6 kilowatt hour battery pack. Now, at first I was, because that's a plus $100,000 car. It's their flagship. They're really pushing that it's this EV or PHEV, but it is a few years old now, 5 or 6 maybe even. Could be even a little more. Correct me, please, if you know that. So it's no surprise that it only has that, and I guess given when it came out, that was still pretty good compared to what could be there. So unfortunately, none of those would be really an option as well. So moving into Cadillac, they did make, unfortunately they do not make it anymore, a CT6 PHEV sedan, which had an 18.6 kilowatt hour battery, which is more than the Clarity at 17. But unfortunately, it had a stated range of only 50 kilometers over the Clarity 74, if I go by the same EPA rating, despite having a slightly larger battery pack. So on paper, it looks like it might have been a contender, so to speak, but the range that it advertises, there must be a bunch of other reasons why. It's probably really even heavier than the Clarity because of all the luxury that they tried to slam into it, which would be great, but not what I'm looking for. Plus, unfortunately, GM killed that due to lack of sales, and oddly, it also did not share any real technology, maybe some, forgive me, but most of the technology in the CT6 PHEV is not shared with the Volt, which seems a little counterproductive and probably contributed to the demise of the CT6, and also that people shopping in that price range are probably not really that interested in hybrid fuel efficiency. So anyway, that's a good segue into the Volt itself. In my opinion, Chevy's only real PHEV on the market, and it has an 18.4 kilowatt battery pack. Again, oddly, not the same as the CT6's 18.6. I guess that's just packaging, but it's good for 85 kilometers, they say, on full EV, and that, of course, is impressive. And you seem to get an awful lot of extra range, 11 kilometers or so, 6 miles for that extra 1.4 kilowatt hours. So fantastic. I'll say more of this at the end of this video, but I really didn't look at the Volt much when I purchased my Clarity last year. Were I to do it again, I think I would very much spend time driving it, sitting in it, trying to test drive it for a full day if I could, to really run it through its paces. But more on that later. Which brings me to the Chrysler Pacifica. Now, I'm not sure if they have that in this vehicle in the US, but in Canada here, they ship the Pacifica PHEV with a 16 kilowatt hour battery, which on its face is really intriguing to me because I've been a dad for a while. My kids are kind of past the minivan stage, as am I, but if it was 10 years ago, I would very much be interested in a van that would be big enough to do everything that I need that to do, but with the low operating costs of the Clarity. To me, that would be perfect. So again, I'm kind of past that stage of my life, but I'm sure there are lots and lots of people my age or younger, certainly the millennials that are coming into that will need the space if they choose to have large families and want the low running costs, because I have driven minivans and wagons and big sedans, and most of the time, other than the ridiculous expense to maintain them, I lament the fuel costs that I've spent. Because again, you need it for all of your family, but most of the time you're not driving that way. So anyway, something to consider, but regrettably it only has a 50 kilometer or a 30-mile range that would cool that enthusiasm. Maybe it's their first kick at it. With that much battery pack storage, you figure that maybe they can improve on that in the coming years. So stay tuned for that. Otherwise, the Ford has the Fusion Energi, which at the time I bought my car was realistically the only alternative I considered, for two reasons. One is it's local. I've seen a few. The second is my uncle, my great uncle actually, was the first person in his province to own the Fusion Energi. Now he loves it. It served him very well. But it has a 9.8 kilowatt hour battery, and with the paltry range from that in full EV, and my general dislike for Fords as of late, because among many other things, they have an inability to keep gearboxes from blowing up, made this a bit of a non-starter for me. Plus, it's almost the same price, or was within percentage, not a rounding error, but close enough to the Clarity that I clearly, at the time, thought the Clarity was the better choice. So you kind of sense a theme here. Forgive me for being a little pedantic, but many of these alternatives, even halfway through 2019, barely have over half the capacity of the Clarity, and many cost far more to purchase and presumably to maintain. So unfortunately for the rest of my list that will continue, but in the effort of being comprehensive, and for those of you that are interested, the Kia, they have a few models that are PHEV, but they all run the 9.8 kilowatt hour battery pack. Hyundai has their Ioniq, which is new, which is 8.9, and one of the biggest surprises to me is the Toyota Prius Prime. Even the new one is only 8.8 kilowatt hours. So all of those render themselves out of my list because they just wouldn't have the range. I need more than 20 miles, right? The whole point of my car is to drive it back and forth to work and around all day long in the city and not have to use any gas. Again, not to save money on fuel as much as just to save money on maintenance and all of those costs. So, but anyway, in hindsight, the Prius is a smaller car, so that does put a premium on space for the battery pack. But as a leader in this space, forgive me for using the same word twice, I kind of would expect more from Toyota, and I'm sure in the future they'll improve that too. Now again, I get the whole idea of space, but it's not that small of a car anymore. So, which brings me to my final two, and they're both SUVs. Mitsubishi has a new Outlander out, which you've probably seen all the ads recently. It's got a 13.8 kilowatt hour battery capacity, which is a great step forward in the SUV space. It would almost let me, with that range that it might get, it would probably help me get it past round one of my consideration. But again, I'm not really an SUV guy. But the final option is actually quite intriguing to me. It's the Volvo T8 SUV. I've always had a soft spot for Volvos, given their historical quirkiness, kind of like Saab. And thankfully, the good old Volvo joke of when you bought one, everyone said you threw away the car and kept the box because they had about the sexiness of a shipping container. That's no longer the case. A good friend of mine has a XC90 or whatever it is. It's a beautiful car, a beautiful place to be. Very expensive to maintain, but maybe with the plug-in, unfortunately it's only a 10.4 kilowatt hour battery, but it might have enough range to make me, my desire for something kind of cool like that, or the quirkiness might make me think twice about it. I'd frankly like to investigate that a little more, so if any of you are Volvo dealers, I'd love to take one for a spin and a test drive, but we'll see. At the end of all this, and after you've seen all the pictures and the numbers on how far these cars can drive, or the size of their battery capacity, which is obviously directly proportional to that, the theme of this video still became pretty evident. None of these cars realistically made it past beyond the Volt, and the Clarity make it past my first gate. So why did I even bother having two more criteria? It doesn't make a lot of sense if they can't make it past the first one, but it was an interesting thought experiment to do. So if you want a summary of sorts, if your criteria are rather similar to mine, again, with emphasis probably 70% on range, 15% on the other two, well, maybe a little more for reliability, because that has to be a big chunk of it. You're kind of down to the same two that I was presented with, and that's the Clarity and the Volt. And as I said before, knowing what I know now, I would actually spend an awful lot more time researching the Volt as a viable alternative to the Clarity. I still kind of think I'd end up with the Clarity. I'm a bit of a Honda guy. You know, and one person's experience doesn't represent the whole brand, but I've had lots of good luck with the Hondas I've owned in my lifetime. And if I even have a Honda S2000 with over 180,000 kilometers on it, which I'm in the process of tearing apart, so the Clarity was a bit of a natural choice for me. So that's kind of where I end up there on what's available in the plug-in hybrid market. I want to call this next quick section, forgive me, a bit of a prologue, because at the time I'm making this video, Tesla has begun shipping their entry-level Model 3, and its price range is, right now it's 54.9-ish Canadian for the entry-level one. That gets you just shy of 400K, so call it 270 miles for about 55K. That's pretty darn good, and of course, even though it's a little extra money, it has zero maintenance, and I wouldn't spend any money on gas, clearly, which would make it very attractive. However, I'm not willing to toss my Clarity right now, so it's not a viable option at this time. But if it was a year ago, or if I was shopping right now, I would give it a good, long, hard look. And the only other reason why I may not consider going full electric beyond the bit of range, you know, I live in a part of the world where it's a big step between countries, or between cities rather. If and when I do go fully electric, I expect that to be a very long-term relationship. You know, I'm thinking 10 years. So I'd want the car that I buy to be spec'd very close to what it is that I want, if not exactly. So as it sits right now, the Model 3 that I would like is really close to about 100,000 bones. That's a lot, because at the end of the day, who doesn't want A, full autopilot, and B, a scorching quarter-mile time? Because even though this is about practical cars, I'm not carved of stone. I still love speed. So if I want to make that leap, that car, again, seems like it's 50 years in the future. You can control it with your phone. That would be fantastic. So that's also what's holding me back, or would have held me back if I was going to do the same thing right now. So anyway, thank you for watching for this long. I know I tend to do that, and I'm sorry, but there's a lot of data to get through. If you have any questions about any of it, or any clarity on all of that, sorry, bad pun not intended, please let me know. I am always interested in doing more, but as it sits now, that was a good kind of primary swath through what's available in the plug-in hybrid market, and why I would still end up going with the Tesla and or looking really long and hard at the Volt. So if you've made it this long, as I always say, thank you for watching. As always, I hope you got something out of this video, even slightly. And again, I always welcome your comments, your criticisms, good and bad, and all the feedback you want to give me. So please, please, please feel free. My only ask is that you consider perhaps throwing me a like and a subscribe if you want to learn more about my ridiculous car and my relationship with it. Which, by the way, as it sits right now, 31,000 kilometers, and my ICE kilometers mileage has stayed exactly about, it hasn't moved at all, because in the last 6 weeks I've driven nothing but electric. So about 8,000 on gas, the rest on electricity, and my average is now down to under 2 cents per kilometer running EV, because my range is up to about 75 kilometers in the warm weather. So anyway, folks, with that, as always, thank you for watching, and I look forward to chatting with you in the next video. Bye now.